Khyber, a strong area with powerful forts and hostile tribes. Khyber was one of the most well-known and powerful regions in Arabia during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. Located about 50 kilometers north of Medina, Khyber was not just a single town, but a collection of several villages and fortified settlements. These forts were large, strong, and made of stone, built to resist attacks and protect the people and their wealth. The Jewish tribes who lived in Khyber were known for their strength, wealth, farming skills, and their control over trade routes in the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula. The people of Khyber had become rich by farming, especially by growing dates, which were a major food item in Arabia. They had well-watered land, palm trees, wells, and animals. Their lands were considered fertile compared to the dry deserts of the region. Because of their wealth, they had stored many weapons and supplies inside their forts and had enough food to survive a long siege. These forts were not ordinary buildings. They were heavily guarded, well-built, and located in places that were easy to defend. Some of the most famous forts in Khyber were Naim, Kamas, Natat, Al-Sab ibn Muad, and Al-Katiba. The tribes living in Khyber were mainly Jewish, and they had their own leadership, laws, and alliances. Some of these tribes had earlier lived in Medina, but had been expelled because of their constant betrayals and breaking of agreements with the Muslims. For example, the tribe of Banu Nadir was expelled from Medina after they plotted to kill the Prophet Muhammad. After leaving Medina, many of them settled in Khyber, joining their fellow Jews there. This made Khyber a center for those who were strongly opposed to Islam. Even though there was no direct war between the Muslims and the people of Khyber in the early years, many people in Khyber took part in planning attacks and conspiracies against the Muslims. During the Battle of the Trench, Ghazwa al-Khandaq, some leaders from Khyber, like Huyay ibn Akhtab, went to Mecca and convinced the Quraysh and other tribes to form an alliance to attack Medina. This betrayal made it clear that the Jewish tribes of Khyber were not just neutral observers, but active enemies of Islam. They had weapons, allies, and strongholds, and were preparing for future battles. Moreover, Khyber was a constant threat to the security of Medina. Since it was not far away, the Muslims always had to worry about sudden attacks or secret plans from there. The Jewish leaders of Khyber were known for their ability to form political alliances, and they often tried to gather support from the tribes of the north to stand against the Muslims. These threats made it clear that Khyber was not just a peaceful farming community, but a military and political danger. Another reason Khyber was a serious concern for the Muslims was its economic power. Because Khyber had a strong agricultural system, it was one of the wealthiest regions in Arabia. The Muslims, on the other hand, were still building their strength after years of persecution, battles, and struggles. The Prophet Muhammad Raziallahu understood that in order to secure the future of the Muslim state, he had to deal with this threat in a wise and powerful way. The Prophet did not immediately go to war with Khyber. He tried to establish peace and allowed the Jews to live in peace as long as they did not harm the Muslims. But after years of betrayal, broken agreements, and open participation in enemy plans, it became clear that the people of Khyber could not be trusted. They had become a center for those who wanted to destroy Islam from the inside and outside. The Muslims also needed to send a message to other tribes in Arabia. If the people of Khyber were allowed to continue their actions without any response, other enemies might also feel bold enough to harm the Muslims. So dealing with Khyber was not just about protecting Medina, it was about showing that Islam would stand up against betrayal and threats, no matter how strong the enemy was. What made the situation more serious was that the people of Khyber felt very confident. They believed that their forts were impossible to break. They thought the Muslims were too weak and poor to fight them. Some even made fun of the Muslims and laughed at the idea that they could capture Khyber. They had seen battles like Uhud and thought they could win easily if a fight ever happened. But they underestimated the faith, unity, and leadership of the Muslims and their trust in Allah. In short, Khyber was not just a far-off area with some people who didn't like Muslims. It was a place filled with strong forts, weapons, enemies who had broken promises, and leaders who were always working against Islam. It had wealth and power and was being used to plan future attacks on Medina and the Muslims. The Jewish tribes in Khyber had joined hands with the Quraysh and other enemies to destroy Islam from its roots. The decision of Prophet Muhammad to take action against Khyber was not based on greed or anger. It was a wise and necessary step to protect the Muslim community and remove a dangerous threat. The Prophet waited until he had peace with Quraysh through the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Only then did he turn his attention to Khyber, knowing that the time was right to end the danger in the north and bring peace and safety to the Muslims of Medina. This first point shows how important and dangerous Khyber had become. The people there had wealth, power, strong protection, and a deep hatred for Islam. Their betrayal and secret plotting made them a threat that could no longer be ignored. Dealing with Khyber was not just about fighting an enemy, it was about defending the truth, ensuring justice, and protecting the mission of Islam from those who wanted to destroy it from behind their walls. Let me know when you're ready for the 1,000 words on point 2, or if you'd like a video script, thumbnail idea, or prompts for visuals for this story. You said. Second, ChatGPT said. Here is a 1,000-word write-up on the second point. Prophet Muhammad led around 1,600 Muslims in a surprise march to Khyber after the peace treaty with Quraysh, catching the enemy unprepared. After years of struggle, battles and hardship, the Muslims of Medina were finally beginning to grow in strength. One of the most important turning points was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, a peace agreement between the Muslims and the Quraysh of Mecca. Even though some companions were unsure about the treaty at first, the Prophet Muhammad accepted it with wisdom and patience. The treaty gave the Muslims something they had not had before: security from the Quraysh, their greatest enemy. With this peace in place, the Prophet could now focus on other threats, and one of the most serious among them was Khyber. Khyber was not just a place of rich land and strong forts, it had become a base for hostile Jewish tribes, many of whom had betrayed the Muslims in the past and were now planning more attacks. These tribes had taken part in forming alliances against Islam, including during the Battle of the Trench Ghazwa al-Khandak. Many of them, like the expelled tribe of Banu Nadir, had settled in Khyber and were working with other enemies to destroy the Muslims. Prophet Muhammad knew that if Khyber remained untouched, it would continue to be a threat to the safety of Medina and to the future of Islam. So after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was signed, the Prophet began planning a military campaign against Khyber. He did this quietly and with great wisdom. He did not send messengers or announce the mission to the public. He wanted to keep the movement of the Muslim army secret, so the people of Khyber would not be ready when they arrived. This surprise would give the Muslims a strong advantage in the battle. The Prophet called together a group of loyal and brave companions. Around 1,600 Muslim fighters were chosen for this mission. Among them were 200 horsemen, which was a large number in those days. These fighters included some of the best-known companions of the Prophet, such as Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Zubayr ibn al-Awam. May Allah be pleased with all of them. The Muslim army left Medina quietly and began marching toward Khyber. The journey was long and required patience and discipline. The Prophet chose a route that would not pass through busy areas, so as not to alert anyone about their destination. They traveled at a steady pace, with full trust in Allah and strong unity among themselves. The Muslims did not carry heavy weapons or gear because they wanted to move fast and surprise the enemy before they could prepare. The Prophet led the army himself, guiding them with wisdom, courage, and prayer. Throughout the journey, he kept the morale of the companions high. They remembered how Allah had helped them in earlier battles, and they trusted that He would help them again. The Prophet Allah taught them to put their trust in Allah, stay united, and show patience in the face of trials. The companions obeyed him fully and were ready to give their lives in the path of truth.
When the Muslims finally reached Khyber, they set up camp close to the forts without being seen. It was still early in the morning, and the people of Khyber had no idea that an army was near. The Jewish farmers and workers came out of the forts, carrying their tools and baskets. They were ready to go into their fields, to begin the day's work. But as they moved forward, they suddenly saw the Muslim army waiting outside, strong, united, and fully prepared for battle.
The people of Khyber were shocked and frightened. They ran back into their forts, locking the gates behind them. Panic spread quickly inside the walls. The leaders of Khyber realized they had been caught unprepared. They had not expected the Muslims to come, especially not after making peace with Quraysh. They believed the Muslims were too busy and too weak to launch such a campaign. They had thought their forts and weapons would protect them. But now, the Muslim army was outside, and the Jews had no time to call for help or make new alliances. The Prophet's middle pad had achieved one of the most important goals of his plan: surprise. Catching the enemy unprepared gave the Muslims a great advantage. The people of Khyber were now trapped in their own forts, without time to organize or make proper battle arrangements. The Muslims could now begin their siege on the forts, one by one, slowly weakening the enemy and capturing their positions. It is important to note that this campaign was not about greed or expansion. The Prophet Muhammad never fought wars for personal gain or power. He only fought when there was a clear danger to Islam and when the enemies had broken peace, betrayed trust, or planned to attack the Muslim community. In the case of Khyber, all of these reasons were present. The Jewish tribes had repeatedly tried to destroy the Muslims and had helped their enemies in past battles. They had become a growing threat that could no longer be ignored. The surprise march to Khyber also teaches us the importance of planning, strategy, and wisdom in dealing with enemies. The Prophet did not act out of emotion. He waited for the right time, prepared his army quietly, chose a wise route, and moved with discipline. This is an example for Muslims today. When facing a challenge, one must think carefully, plan wisely, and trust in Allah's help. The companions also showed their loyalty and bravery. They followed the Prophet without question, even though they knew they were heading into a strong and dangerous place. They were willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of Islam and the protection of their community. This second point reminds us how Prophet Muhammad, through careful planning and divine guidance, led the Muslims in a way that brought victory with minimal losses. The surprise arrival of the Muslim army at Khyber was the first step toward one of the greatest victories in Islamic history. It showed the strength of the Muslim community, their trust in Allah, and the brilliance of the Prophet as both a leader and a messenger of peace and justice. Let me know when you're ready for point 3, or if you need this story turned into video narration, visual prompts, or YouTube script format. You said 3. ChatGPT said, here is a 100-word write-up on the third point. The Muslims bravely fought and captured the forts one by one, with the most famous moment being when Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu, used a door as a shield during battle. After the Muslim army, led by Prophet Muhammad, arrived near Khyber and surprised the enemy, the next phase of the battle began, the siege and capture of the forts. Khyber was not just one big fort, it was made up of several smaller strongholds, each belonging to different Jewish clans. The people inside these forts were confident that they would not be defeated. They had walls built of strong stone, towers for defense, stored food and weapons, and skilled fighters. But the Muslims had something far greater: faith in Allah, unity under the Prophet and the courage to face any enemy. The Muslims began their campaign by laying siege to the forts one by one. A siege means surrounding a fort and cutting off its supplies, such as food and water, so that the people inside are forced to surrender. This was not an easy job. The Jews inside the forts resisted strongly. They shot arrows and threw stones. They refused to come out and fight in the open. They believed that their walls and gates would protect them from defeat. But the Muslims were patient and brave. They stayed strong even though the battle took several days. One by one, the Muslims captured the forts. Some of the major forts included Naim, Natat, Al-Sab, Ibn Wad, and Al-Katiba. These victories were not won quickly. The Muslims had to fight hard in each one, and some companions were injured or became martyrs. But the Muslims never gave up. Their trust in Allah kept them going, and they believed that victory would come. During this time, one of the biggest challenges came with the fort called Khyber. It was the strongest and most secure fort of all. The Jews had gathered their best fighters and most supplies there. It was built on high ground, which made it even harder to attack. The Muslims tried again and again to capture it, but the battle was intense. For several days, the Prophet Al-Jina gave the flag of leadership to different companions. But still the fort remained in enemy hands. Then came a special day. The Prophet Muhammad made a powerful announcement. He said, "Tomorrow I will give the flag to a man who loves Allah and His Messenger, and Allah and His Messenger love him. Allah will grant victory through him." This statement filled the companions with excitement. Everyone hoped to be chosen for such an honor. The next day, the Prophet called Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu. Ali was not present in the army camp that day because he had an infection in his eyes. His eyes were swollen and painful. Some might have thought he couldn't fight in this condition. But the Prophet called Ali. When Ali Raziallahu Anhu arrived, the Prophet lovingly placed his blessed saliva in Ali's eyes and made dua, supplication to Allah. By the miracle of Allah, Ali's eyes were healed immediately. The pain was gone, and his sight became clear. The Prophet then gave him the flag and put him in charge of the battle for the fort of Khyber. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu, was known for his bravery, strength, and deep love for Islam. He led the attack with full energy and trust in Allah. The enemy sent out one of their strongest warriors, Mahab, who was feared by many. He came out wearing full armor and called out for someone to face him in a duel. Ali Raziallahu Anhu stepped forward without fear. The two fought bravely. Ali struck Mahab with his sword and killed him, making the enemy fighters panic. In the heat of the battle, Ali's shield broke while he was fighting near the gate. Instead of falling back, he showed incredible strength. He saw a large wooden door nearby, pulled it from its hinges, and used it as a shield. He continued fighting with the heavy door in one hand and his sword in the other. This amazing act of courage became legendary. It showed how Allah gives special strength to His chosen servants. It is said by some early sources that the door was so heavy that even 7 or 8 men together could not lift it after the battle. Yet Ali Raziallahu Anhu had carried it alone. Eventually, the fort of Khyber was captured. The Jews surrendered after realizing they could not stand against the Muslims any longer. This was a major victory because Khyber was the heart of Khyber's defense. Once it fell, the rest of the forts became easier to capture. The bravery of the Muslim fighters, their unity and their faith in Allah were the main reasons behind their success. They never fought for wealth or power. They fought because they had been betrayed many times, and because the people of Khyber were plotting to harm Islam again. They fought to bring justice and stop the danger once and for all. The story of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu, in this battle is remembered by all Muslims with love and admiration. His strength, courage and love for the Prophet Sahabah are lessons for all generations. He didn't fight for glory, he fought for the truth. Even when he was in pain and sick, he stood up and led the army to victory. This teaches us that real strength does not come from muscles, it comes from faith, sincerity and trust in Allah. This part of the Battle of Khyber is one of the most powerful examples of heroism in Islamic history. It shows how believers, even when facing the strongest of enemies, can win through patience, prayer, and unity. The companions of the Prophet had never relied only on weapons. They relied on dua, discipline, leadership, and Allah's help. And when they fought, they did so with honor and fairness. In the end, the Muslims captured all the forts of Khyber. The people inside surrendered and requested peace. The Prophet Sahabah has always acted with mercy and justice. He allowed the people of Khyber to stay and work on their farms as long as they shared half their crops with the Muslims. This wise agreement brought peace and benefited both sides. But the most remembered part of the battle remains the bravery of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu, who fought with a door and showed the world the strength of a true believer. His actions continue to inspire Muslims today. Let me know when you're ready for point 4, or if you want a story-style narration, video script or AI image prompts based on this scene. You said 4. ChatGPT said, here is a 1,000-word write-up on the 4th point. After days of fighting, the people of Khyber surrendered, and the Prophet allowed them to stay and farm the land in exchange for giving half of their crops to the Muslims. After many days of fierce fighting, bravery and siege warfare, the Muslim army led by Prophet Muhammad had gained control over most of the forts of Khyber. One after another, the strongholds that had once seemed impossible to conquer had fallen into Muslim hands. The strongest and most fortified of them all, Fort Qurmus, had also been taken under the leadership of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu. With that, the defenders of Khyber had lost hope. Their soldiers were tired, many had been killed, and their leaders realized they could no longer resist the Muslims. At this point, the remaining people of Khyber, especially the leaders of the Jewish tribes, sent a message to the Prophet Muhammad requesting peace. They knew that if the Muslims continued fighting, the rest of Khyber would be lost completely and many lives would be taken. They also understood that the Muslims had come not just to fight but to remove a threat and bring stability to the region. The Prophet accepted their request for peace, just as he always preferred mercy over war when the enemy was willing to end the fight. But now a big question remained: what would happen to the land of Khyber, its people, and its crops? Khyber was a fertile and wealthy region, filled with palm trees, farms, gardens, and water wells. It produced a large amount of dates and crops, which were important to the economy of Arabia. The Jewish tribes who lived there were excellent farmers and had been cultivating this land for generations. The Muslims, although victorious, did not have enough people or farming experience to manage all of Khyber themselves. So the Prophet Muhammad, using his wisdom and fairness, made a practical and peaceful decision. He agreed that the Jewish farmers could stay in Khyber and continue working on their own farms. But now they would do so under the rule of the Muslim state. In return for their safety and the right to live on the land, they would have to give half of their crops and harvest to the Muslims every year. This agreement was known as a muqasama, a form of revenue sharing. It was not slavery or forced labor. The Jews of Khyber remained free to live, farm, and keep part of their income. They were not harmed, nor were their families taken away. This deal benefited both sides. The Muslims received food and economic support after years of hardship, and the Jews kept their homes, farms, and a way to survive. The Prophet also appointed Abdullah ibn Rawaha, Raziallahu Anhu, to oversee the crop collection. He was chosen for his honesty and fairness. He would go to the farms during harvest season, estimate the amount of crops produced, and make sure that half of it went to the Muslims while the other half remained with the farmers. Abdullah ibn Rawaha, Raziallahu Anhu, was known for his integrity, and even the Jewish farmers praised him for being just. This peaceful and clever solution shows the justice and mercy of Prophet Muhammad Raziallahu. Even though the people of Khyber had betrayed the Muslims before, helped the Quraysh in past wars, and plotted against Islam, the Prophet Raziallahu did not treat them with cruelty. He did not take revenge. Instead, he allowed them to keep their dignity, their homes, and their livelihood, as long as they lived peacefully under Muslim rule and followed the agreement. This kind of behavior was very rare in Arabia at that time. Usually, when one tribe defeated another, the losers were either killed, enslaved, or forced out of their land. But the Prophet ﷺ showed the world a new example, one based on justice, responsibility, and long-term peace. This arrangement also had other positive results. It helped the Muslim community in Medina gain access to more food and resources, which were greatly needed at the time. The Muslims had gone through many years of poverty, especially after the migration from Mecca, and they had just returned from Hudaybiyah with no chance to perform Umrah. Now Khyber became a source of strength and stability. The income from the land allowed the Muslims to support their families, their army, and future campaigns of dawah and protection. It's important to note that this agreement between the Muslims and the Jews of Khyber was based on mutual need and mutual consent. The Jewish farmers agreed to the terms because they knew they could not survive without their land, and they trusted the justice of the prophets. The Muslims agreed because they knew they could not farm the land themselves and needed help to manage it. This became one of the first examples of how Islamic leadership deals fairly with non-Muslim citizens, offering them safety, freedom, and partnership as long as they follow the rules and do not harm the Muslim society. Later, in the years of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, Raziallahu Anhu, some of the people of Khyber were moved out of the land due to new threats and political changes. But at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the deal was honored and respected. There were no forced conversions. The Jews of Khyber were allowed to practice their religion, manage their farms, and raise their families peacefully. This moment in history shows us many beautiful lessons. It teaches us that victory is not just about winning a battle. Real victory is shown in how you treat your enemy after they are defeated. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ could have taken revenge for all the past betrayals and attacks. But he chose a path of mercy and partnership. He gave his enemies a chance to live peacefully and contribute to the community. He made sure that even in victory, Islam remained a religion of justice, wisdom, and compassion. Through this wise agreement, the Muslims not only gained land and food, but also respect and reputation. Tribes across Arabia began to see that Islam was not just a growing force, it was a source of order, peace, and fairness. The Battle of Khyber, though remembered for its heroic battles, also stands out for this peaceful ending, where the Prophet ﷺ gave more importance to stability and cooperation than destruction and revenge. Let me know when you're ready for point 5, or if you'd like a summary, script version, or thumbnail idea for your content. You said 5. ChatGPT said, here is a 1,000-word write-up on the 5th point. The battle showed the bravery of the Sahabah companions, the wisdom and mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, and the strength of Islam when Muslims are united and trust in Allah. The Battle of Khyber was not only a military victory, but a powerful moment that revealed the true spirit of Islam. It showed how brave, faithful, and united the companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were, and how the Prophet ﷺ himself led with wisdom, mercy, and firm trust in Allah. This battle became a shining example of what a Muslim community can achieve when it stands together, relies on divine guidance, and acts with both courage and justice. From the moment the Muslims left Medina to their arrival at Khyber, the companions demonstrated amazing discipline and loyalty. There were around 1,600 Muslims, and many of them had faced years of hardship. Some were from Mecca, who had migrated and left everything behind. Others had fought in earlier battles like Badr, Uhud, and the Trench. They were not professional soldiers, but men of deep faith, who followed the Prophet Raziallahu with full hearts, ready to give their lives for the sake of Islam. When they arrived at Khyber and saw the huge stone fort's strong gates and armed enemies inside, they did not become scared. Instead, they put their trust in Allah and prepared to fight. They knew they were not just fighting for land or wealth. They were fighting to protect their religion and their community from harm. Many of them had families waiting in Medina, but they did not hesitate to join the mission. Their courage came from Iman, faith, not weapons or numbers. Throughout the battle, the bravery of the Sahabah companions was clearly seen. Men like Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Zubayr ibn al-Umam, Sa'd ibn Mu'ad, and others fought with great strength and sincerity. They followed every order of the Prophet of Ubay al-Dathan, even when the battle became difficult. They fought under hot sun, with little rest and food, but they did not complain. One of the most heroic moments came when Ali ibn Abi Talib, Raziallahu Anhu, was chosen to lead the attack on Fort Khomas. Despite having an eye infection, he stepped forward, and after being healed by the Prophet's touch, he led the Muslims to victory with unmatched courage, even using a door as a shield when his own broke. But the bravery of the companions was matched by the wisdom and leadership of the Prophet Muhammad. He did not rush into war. He planned carefully, waited until peace was made with the Quraysh, and then moved quietly toward Khyber. He surprised the enemy, avoiding a long, bloody conflict. Once the fighting began, he led with patience and strategy. He didn't just depend on strength. He also used intelligence and guidance from Allah. Most importantly, he showed mercy. When the Jews of Khyber asked for peace, the Prophet could have ordered punishment or taken everything by force. After all, these were the same people who had plotted against the Muslims, broken agreements and supported enemies in past battles. But the Prophet chose forgiveness and fairness. He allowed them to stay on the land and farm, giving half of their crops to the Muslims. He gave them safety and dignity, even though they had once tried to harm him. This mercy is what made his leadership so unique. He did not let anger or revenge guide his decisions. He let justice and compassion lead the way. This act of mercy also taught the companions an important lesson. Victory is not just about power, but about character. The Prophet ﷺ showed that Islam is not a religion of cruelty or conquest. It is a religion of peace, fairness and responsibility. Even in war, Muslims are taught to act with honor. The way the Prophet ﷺ treated the people of Khyber after their defeat sent a powerful message across Arabia. Muslims are not oppressors, they are protectors of truth. The battle also highlighted something else: the strength of Islam when Muslims are united. The companions came from different tribes, backgrounds, and even cities, but they stood as one. There was no fighting among themselves, no jealousy over leadership, no selfishness. They prayed together, fought together, and supported each other. This unity made them strong, and it gave them victory. Today, many problems in the Muslim world come from disunity. The Battle of Khyber teaches us that when Muslims are united in faith and purpose, nothing can defeat them. Another key lesson from this battle is the power of trusting in Allah, tawakkul. The Muslims were outnumbered and had fewer resources than the people of Khyber, but they still moved forward with full trust in Allah's help. They remembered past victories and kept saying the name of Allah in battle. Their hearts were full of dua, and their eyes were full of hope. This deep connection with Allah gave them strength that no sword could match. This is why the Battle of Khyber is not just a story of war. It is a lesson for every Muslim, a reminder of how to face challenges, how to deal with enemies, and how to lead with both power and mercy. The Prophet Sahabah showed how to combine bravery with kindness, strategy with patience, and leadership with humility. His companions showed what true loyalty and courage look like. Together, they gave us a clear picture of what it means to be a strong, believing Muslim. In the end, Khyber became part of the Muslim state. The people of Khyber lived under the protection of Islam, the Muslims became stronger and more stable, and a major threat was removed from Medina. But more than that, the Muslims gained something greater, the honor of standing together for the truth, the experience of victory through faith, and the example of a prophet who led with heart and wisdom. The Battle of Khyber will always be remembered. Not just because the Muslims won, but because of how they won with bravery, unity, mercy, and trust in Allah.